Hi, my name is Nick Cosentino, and I'm a principal software engineering manager at Microsoft. In this interview, I got to sit down with Andrew Peacock, who is not only a software engineer, but a side SaaS builder and a family man. So, Andrew is juggling a ton, and in this conversation, you get to hear his perspective about how things change over time with respect to your priorities, how you balance time, things like that, because we all have very busy lives. We got to dive into some AI topics, we focus on some things for junior engineers getting started, and overall, I think there's a lot of very actionable advice that'll help you. If you like this kind of content, leave a comment below to let me know. Thanks, sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Well, maybe to kick things off, Andrew, like I know as we've been kind of chatting and I've been following you for a little bit. I think it's really cool for people to hear like your journey. So like hearing where you're at now and kind of how you got there, just because it's different for everyone. And I think that unique journey just really helps other people see like, hey, it's not just one path you have to go do to be successful. So if you don't mind, it'd be great to hear about that.
Yeah, so my name is Andrew Peacock. I've been a full stack developer for a little over a decade now, and really trying to do full stack to the fullest. Not just front end and back end, but I was also an SRE for a little while. So I did
Cool.
played in the DevOps land. I try really hard not to go back there anymore. But I had a fairly traditional career path. I went through a 4-year degree, got some certifications along the way, had your traditional internship doing some Android development. So I'm happy to kind of be back on the mobile dev. But then I just went right into the workforce and kind of, climbed my way up the corporate ladder to where I'm at right now. And only recently have I started to really dive into the content creation and building products on the side and, having a lot of fun doing it so far.
That's awesome. Did you maybe like when you were younger, did you always kind of think that you wanted to go the technical route or like when did you think that you kind of realized you're like, yeah, I think I want to write code or like I'm gonna go to school like post-secondary for this kind of thing?
Oh, that's such a funny question. So when I was younger, I was not technical literally at all. I was
Okay.
like a sports geek. Didn't play video games, just played football with my friends. And then I got a pair of Heelys. And for those of you who don't know, Heelys are the shoe with the single wheel in the background, or sorry, in the back of the heel of the shoe. And yeah, I had them for an hour and broke the growth plate in my left ankle in my buddy's garage. So I went from being a total sports nerd to not doing any sports at all in a cast almost up to my knee. And that was for many months, and found old school RuneScape along the way. And that kind of, got me sucked into video games. And then I stayed technical ever since. So I was really fortunate where I went into college knowing like computer science is what I want to do. I truly do love the idea of taking literally a notepad and making something that does something, right? You could be totally basic, HTML, right?
Mhm.
But just having the ability to say, all I need is my laptop and I can make things like that's super cool
Right.
to me.
Yeah, and so thank you for sharing that. I wanted to say, like, I don't know, like, I'm sorry, but also that's really cool. Like, I'm sorry that that happened, right? Because it sounds like obviously that kind of changed the trajectory of your life. But I would also say, and I mean, I don't know your life story, but I feel like things are going pretty good. Like, it seems like it was a good sequence of events in the end.
Yeah, no, it all worked. Yeah, it definitely worked out. Great job now. I have the house, I have the family, and it's like all
Right.
of the things that we think we need in life and strive to have in life, kind of thing. So it did work out. I found sports back along the way. I
Sure.
didn't like completely 180. Went to school to go play soccer. Got hurt playing soccer. Had to actually drop out of college for a semester. Went back to college, and then I was a competitive rock climber for my university.
Oh
So
wow.
jumping around rocks and doing crazy stunts and working at the rock wall, which was more of like a hanging out rather than a job.
Sure, sure. No, well, that's cool though. I'm glad to like. I mean that does actually make me feel way better about your story because I was like, oh man, that I'm so sorry to hear that. But it sounds like you were able to kind of find, the physical part again, whether like depending on the sport and going between a bunch of different ones. That's really cool that you found that again. So thanks for sharing. Okay, so you had mentioned now like you are working in public sector, so lots of top secret projects. We're not going to dive into those. Maybe you mentioned like some internships, right? Like what could you maybe talk about what that experience was like? Because I was kind of a bit of an outlier for school for me. We had 6 internships, like it was a co-op program. So like we literally went to school for 4 months, and then the next 4 months like were an internship. So my first couple of weeks at university, they were like, "You're going to be interviewing next week, so prep your resume." And we were like,
Wow.
"Dude, we don't know anything. Like, what do you mean we have to work?" So I'm a little biased that way, but I always forget that not everyone gets to go through internships, and we should talk about the value of that.
Wow, yeah. So I wish I had 6 internships. Internships is where you actually learn how to write code.
Yeah.
You know, it's really cool when you have the Java class in college or on your certificate course or whatever. But the world does not have a single file Java class that runs a single main. Like that's just not how the rest of the world actually works. So it's the
Yeah.
internships and then beyond into the day force, the workforce, that you actually learn how to do all of those things. My internship was honestly a lot of fun. I was a mobile developer, specifically Android, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is a super fun, cool area. It's very like Amish country. You get some
Oh,
like
cool.
fresh made jelly and stuff like that. So the area is super beautiful. And for all of those, it's not Lancaster, it's Lancaster. So just make sure you check people net from now on. Now that you know, if I didn't say that, all the people from Lancaster would probably shun me. But the internship was a lot of fun. It ran very much like a startup. It was not a massive
Cool.
company, but they did some really cool work. It was kind of like some social media type apps. But yeah, internship is where I learned how to actually work with other people, how to actually write code that is, APIs that connect to other things, right? And you just don't
Mhm.
generally do that in like a 4-year degree.
Before we move on, this is just a quick reminder that I do have a course on C# refactoring available on Dome Train. Refactoring is one of the most critical skills that you can learn as a software engineer, and this helps you continue to build upon applications that already exist, making sure that they can scale and have extensibility. I walk you through a bunch of various techniques and give you some examples that we walk through together to see how we can apply these techniques to refactor the code. Check out the pinned comment and the links in the description to get this course. Now back to the video. Yeah, that definitely resonates with some of my experience. Like I primarily only worked at small companies when I was going through internships, and I think the way that you said that about say your projects and stuff in school, right? A lot of the time, it's hey, like we're focusing on language constructs, or we're going to be focusing on something pretty narrow, and you end up getting like I don't know. It's I'm not trying to talk down the fact that you have projects like this in school because we need building blocks, and I would say,
Sure.
especially like in university, for me, a lot of it was theoretical. So let's talk about these concepts. We'll have a bit of a demonstration of it, but not so much like practical application. There was some certainly, but yeah, when I reflect on internships, it was like a complete 180 from that. It was like we'll talk about some theoretical things as we go. If you have good mentors and stuff, they can kind of add that layer. But otherwise, it was like we got to build stuff and we have customers.
Right.
And when you're at a small company, you really notice that because I can imagine like I didn't have big tech company internships, but being at big tech now versus the startups, like the pace of things is very different. And a startup, it was like
Very different.
everything's always on fire. We always have to
Yep.
ship features. Everyone is doing everything because we have to keep the company going. And I mean, that might sound kind of scary and chaotic for some people that
That's what
haven't
it
worked
is.
in small companies, but that's what it is. And it's cool because as an intern, like you get to have a pretty big impact relative to the company and be exposed to things. Does that kind of resonate with what you felt going through that?
Yeah, I like to pretty much chalk it up as like it's like living in the city versus living out in a rural area, right? When you're
Sure.
at the startup, it's very much city style life where it's very busy. You have a demo tomorrow and then oh, you have a demo the next day too. So it's very hustle and bustle. It's very grind. And I think early in your career when you don't have or hopefully don't have a lot of responsibilities, that's a perfect time to just kind of put your head down, learn as much as you can, ask all of the questions. There's no dumb questions at that stage. And then you go back into a bigger tech company like a Microsoft or something like that. Very different pace, right? You have a
Mhm.
very different set of responsibilities in a good way because it is a huge company, but also the
Yep.
downside of that is you don't sometimes you don't appreciate what you have if you don't understand the full picture. And I think at the startup life, you understand the full picture because you have to.
Yeah. No, I really like that framing. The place I worked at before Microsoft, it was like 8 people when I started there. And your last point about not appreciating like the full picture. When I make this statement, I'm not trying to this isn't meant to insult anyone that kind of joined after that company had grown, but we could literally you could see like as someone who was there from the beginning, you would have people join that, were 4 or 5 years in. And again, not any issue with them or anything like that, but you could tell that they don't have the same appreciation for some of the things going on. Not their fault, but they're joining the company at a point where it is way more stable. They can make assumptions about
Right.
things, and it's it would be unfair to expect of them that they do have some of that same understanding because like, hey, yeah, that code's crappy, but I can remember 3 years ago when we were staying up until 5 in the morning trying to ship this to unblock customers
Right.
because they're doing forensic investigations to help catch pedophiles. Like, we did the right thing in the
It's important.
moment, and now 3 years later you're coming across this pile of crap that we're like, oops, but it helped in the moment, right? So um yeah, I just think that level of appreciation can kind of fall off as companies grow. And like I said, I don't blame people for that kind of thing.
And I will say, while we're on this topic, it is not the only way. And what I mean by that is, I think it's a really powerful thing for people to kind of look intrinsically and understand what kind of vibe they want, right? Like if you love that city environment and you love that like hustle and bustle, startups are going to be probably the only place you want to work. And that's super cool. But if you're like, honestly, I really like a work balance, work life separation, a balance there. I'm okay with maybe learning a little less or moving a little slower. That's when it's super fine to go join in one of these bigger companies where there is a little less risk that you take on as an individual. And I think that's also super okay. I think what sucks for people is when they don't understand what they want, on which side of the fence they are on. And like I said, you go through seasons, right? I did the internship early in my career, hustled really hard. Now, as I have a family and I'm working on other things, I am kind of like not getting in the slow lane. I'm still outperforming as best as I can. I'm still performing as best as I can, but I'm definitely not, pulling 80-hour weeks anymore. And like I said,
Yep.
I think both routes are totally fine. I think you just have to decide what kind of storyline you want.
Yeah, I think that's a really important factor. I want to kind of pivot over to some, how can we help juniors navigate this in just a second, but that I think that point's critical, right? Because you have these different experiences at different styles of companies, and you didn't say it, but I fully believe that you would side with this perspective. But that statement that you made about some of the small companies versus the big companies, you will always find outliers to these things. I'm sure there's
Of
big
course.
companies that
Of
have
course.
teams that are moving at the speed of light and would make your head spin
Yeah, the
compared to some
R&D teams at
startups.
the big companies.
Yeah, like, so anyone who's listening or watching to this, if you're like, "Hey, that's not true. There's this team at this company." Like, yep, there's always, we're speaking in generalizations here. So,
Of
um,
course.
I think the point you made, Andrew, though, about kind of figuring out what you want and then being able to kind of direct that is important. And the fact that that can change over time. I don't have children right now, but even having when I was at the startup, I was single for like for 8 years, right? Like periodically having girlfriends and stuff, but my responsibilities were basically zero. It was me.
Yeah.
I like going to the gym, so if I can go to the gym every day, like, okay, like, boxes checked,
It's
I'll
a good
work.
day.
Like, yeah. And then for me, I went through a period of burnout, and it wasn't typical. Like, hey, like, people listening to this are going to be like, hey, if you're talking about working 60 to 80 hour weeks, like, obviously you're going to burn out. But it was different for me because I was like, I just love working. Like, it was never like, oh man, they're calling me in on a Saturday at 3 in the morning. It was like, I just love to be coding at this job. So the burnout I experienced was really just like, I was multiple years into this being like, I don't, I don't have other responsibilities. I don't do anything outside of this. So I kind of in sort of I ended up getting a dog so that I could have something outside of work to be responsible for. And now, not to this is going to be a terrible jump in terms of my logical flow here. I'm not trying to say like with my wife now, it's like having another dog. I don't mean that, but just having other responsibilities in my life
Of
really
course.
means that do like I couldn't do 80-hour weeks at a startup if I wanted to right now. It would be totally irresponsible at my point in life. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I've definitely made some mistakes. We could dive into it later about like me getting involved in woodworking, and that's why I'm making my SaaS app now. Yeah, I totally made my wife, a single parent right after we had a newborn because I was woodworking, spending all my time in the garage. And the hard lesson that I had to go through, and a great segue for everybody else watching out there, when you start bringing responsibilities into your life, whether it be a partner, children, pets, whatever it may be, other people that are expecting and relying on you, you
Yep.
have 24 hours that you share with them. So if you're
Yep.
adding more and more onto your plate, you're taking from their plate. And that can be okay seasonally as long as you over communicate. Okay, I'm going to be busy for a couple of weeks, but then, I'm going to let you run free kind of thing. Uh, and I think that's totally fine. And I think most people are willing to kind of ebb and flow in that direction. Uh, it just stinks when you are used to your freedoms, quote unquote, and now you have to balance those responsibilities. And like I said, there's 24 hours, and it's not each having 24 hours, it's collectively there's 24 hours.
Yeah, that's a super awesome point. Thank you for sharing that. It's of course it's not like, oh man, like now my wife takes away from all the things I love and she doesn't let me do anything. Like it's of course it's not like that, but I think the way that you framed it is important, right? It's like we're used to having, and maybe not for everyone, right? Maybe some people have been in long-term relationships their entire life kind of thing, but um I think for people that are used to having that and they're going through school and they're going into the startup life or whatever it happens to be, if you're used to having that much flexibility in your schedule and being like, I can just do whatever, I could stay up till 5 in the morning coding at the startup to help them. Uh, because like whatever tomorrow I'll just sleep in, like, I'll talk to people at work about this and I don't have to like explain to my wife or whatever. I don't have kids. It just changes, right? So you just have to
Changes.
keep that in mind. Maybe because I wanted to kind of put the perspective for junior engineers in place here. So I think it was really good to start elaborating on the fact that you want to, be thinking about what you want. And I don't want to put you on the spot totally with this question because I'm trying to think about my own answer to it at the same time. But for folks that are listening or watching, if they're like, hey, like I want to get into the field, like I actually don't know. I don't know how to figure this out for myself. Like, I don't know if I want the fast paced kind of like startup life. Maybe that's too crazy, but like it seems like it would be good learning. And yeah, I don't know, like bigger companies, maybe the pay is better and it's slower pace. Like, isn't that what I want? Like, do you have any thoughts on like how people might be able to kind of explore this for themselves and kind of make a decision and what that looks
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, so speed dating, right? It's you won't know if you don't try it. And I don't think there's any problem going and trying 50 different things just to figure out what you like. And I think it's you're actually doing yourself a disservice if you don't go and try those things because you're going to sit there with the regret of well, what if I would have done it this way? What if I would have? You won't know unless you go try. And I think that is one, the scariest thing to do. And two, when you start doing it, one, it does become easier, but it is so fulfilling because you're trying all these different things. Oftentimes, because you're trying all those different things, you're learning so many different things, and you just become, in my opinion, a better rounded individual that just has a super diverse portfolio to bring really awesome skill sets to whatever your team you're walking in. And I'm not saying like jump jobs every week kind of thing, but don't be afraid to make pivots and say, you know what, actually, I think I want to go work in AR, VR stuff. Oh, I did that, hated it. Let's go do
Mm,
microcontrollers. Like pick the unique things that you like. And if you're looking for somewhere where to start, I always recommend, what are the hobbies you like right now? Let's take a crazy one, right? You're a fisherman. You love fishing. Do you know
yep.
what there's tech on? All of the fish finders on the boat. Go find the companies that are building those fish finders and see if you can get a little gig with them. You'll be totally invested. You'll understand your equipment and your hobby even better. You're gonna be like, I freaking love this. This is so fun.
Yeah, no, that's a really awesome example too. And even on that last part, when people we talk about building side projects and stuff, people are like, where do I start? And I'm like, I love going to like, what are you interested in? Like, I think if
Right.
you can anchor to something that you really enjoy, like for me, when I started programming, it was like, it was video games. You were talking about RuneScape. For some reason, I never played RuneScape. And in hindsight, I'm like, that would have been like the perfect game for me to play. But I always
The best
played
one.
role playing games. Apparently, it's the best one. I'm amazed. I've never gone back or never experienced it in its prime. I guess I would say it's not in its prime currently,
Right.
um, but I was like, I'm gonna build role playing games because this is what I love to do, and it meant that instead of playing the role playing games, I still played a lot of games, but instead of spending all my time doing that, I was like, how do I build my own? And they were always terrible. Like I still have one that's been going on for 20 years. It's not finished. It's not even playable, but like I got to build all of these complex systems into it. I'm like, this is the coolest thing. And it just kept me super motivated. So I love your example of saying, for if you don't know and you want to start, like, could you try and anchor it to a passion that you have? And that way you'll be fully invested into it. So I think that's really cool advice.
I think there's a lot of folks and there's a lot of YouTube videos out there who, and truthfully, I think it's out there because they're just really good YouTube titles. Like, let's build a Netflix clone, let's build a Twitter clone or X clone, Trello. You know, those are the really, really common ones. I actually think it's a mistake to start there because you probably don't use X or Trello, that maybe that much. You
Mm,
probably are like, oh, I actually don't care how it works. And you're just
right.
not going to be emotionally invested and you're going to learn far faster and you're going to soak in far more data if you just have an investment into whatever the heck it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. And then, yeah, I like your example going back a little bit to you were saying like, hey, it's not job hopping, but like you're not gonna know unless you try. And it's funny. I have to acknowledge my own bias, right? I was saying that I had done a bunch of internships through school. Um, I remember my very first internship. I went there twice actually. The owner of that company was he also went to the University of Waterloo, which is where I went, and he was. I always kind of when I bring this up, I'm like, man, this guy was such a good like mentor and like just an awesome person. Like I don't want to say didn't take advantage of that enough. Like as in I don't like the phrase take advantage. I didn't seize the opportunity to
Right.
kind of like learn more from him, but one of the things he told me was like, hey, look, like for coming back on the internship, he's like, I would love to have you back here. And then he was like, but I don't want to take you back a third time. And he was like, but I want you to know that's not like me saying, I don't think that you're a good developer. I don't like you working here. He was like, I really think that you need to go out and try different companies because he's like, this is going to be the best time in your life that you can go every 4 months and just try something completely different. He was like, it's not sort of in my best interest for you to try and keep you here because I think you need to go try different things. And he was so right. Like I did embedded software development with him at that company. The next internship I had, I was the only developer. In hindsight, this is kind of weird, but I was the only developer making like operating room like video switching software. Like that's kind of weird actually that they just had one intern doing that. But anyway, super interesting experience. I jumped over to like making bank machine software so people could configure bank machine screens. Totally, like that's kind of random. And then I did my final internship like making iPad software, and all of those companies. It was like it started with like Python and C for the embedded stuff and some of the tooling, over to C sharp, over to C sharp again, and then I was doing Objective C. So I got to jump around languages, domains. He was totally right. Just like jump around. Like now, do I? If in hindsight, I'm like, do I love embedded programming? No, I don't. Like it was neat, but like I don't love it, so I'm not doing that. Um, did I like doing C sharp and kind of designing applications, kind of like in terms of systems and stuff? I'm like, I really liked doing that. The mobile stuff, I was like, I don't see myself just focusing on making mobile apps. Like, and it was Objective C, so absolutely not. But it got to help me figure out as a starting point which direction I want to go.
Yeah, and it's truly your mentor did you a probably the biggest blessing in your technical career, right? And
Yep.
it's our jobs, now as senior engineers and leaders, I don't know how much management you're doing these days. I still to this
All of
day
it.
have
That's all I
teams
do.
that I'm yeah, so you exactly get you know exactly where I'm coming from. And it is those things where it's like, that phrase, like, if you love it, let it go. And that's kind of how it is. And I always encourage my developers, look, I want you to automate yourself out of a job. I want you
Yep.
to ask me any question. I will teach you whatever you want to know. You just got to be curious. You just got to be willing and desiring to learn.
Yeah, you said two things in like the span of a couple seconds there where I'm like, I have to come back to these because they're so cool. Um, the first one was like, if you love something, you got to let it go. I know, kind of a funny thing to bring up from a software engineering perspective, but I wanted to mention that there's only been I've had a couple of times in my career where people have said to me, um, like basically that they're ready to leave or do something, and I've had situations where people were like, um, kind of like I'll stick around if you stick around kind of thing. So which is kind of cool to hear. But I've had the opposite where people have said like, hey, like it's I'm pursuing this different opportunity. I have this offer, and I remember being like, oh man, like that sucks. Like this person's really good. I don't want to. I don't want them to go. Obviously, they're a great software engineer, and then kind of you have this feeling like it obviously sucks to hear, but then you go through the steps and it's like, okay, you chat with them through it, right? Like, okay, do we have the opportunities that you're after? Like, have I been trying to do that for you? Like, have they resented that? Has there been friction there, or truly has it been a good working relationship? And they're like, yeah, like every time that we talked about this, I was able to try these things out. And when I go through those exercises, I'm like, I actually don't feel bad that like we tried what we could. Sometimes for people, it was like, hey, look, the pay is like it's life changing pay, and I'm like, I'm not going to be the person that says, hey, no, like money doesn't matter. I'm like, look, if it's life
Right.
changing for you, and that amount can be very different for different people, if that's
Of
life
course.
changing, you may find like, hey, look, even if the job is less interesting, whatever, that might afford you other opportunities in your life to be able to say, I'm happier. There's less stress with our family. Like, great.
Of
Like
course.
that's for you to decide. So I thought that was a cool thing just because I had that experience over the last few years and I was like, it's hard, but yeah, like it's best for them, right? Um, the other thing you said, and I'm losing my train of thought because I ramble too much, but uh, we talked about love something, let it go, and you said something right after that. Oh, and I forget it, but it was good. Um, man, do you remember what you said after?
Uh, nope.
not
It
to put
was
not to put you on the spot.
no. It was if you love it, let it go. I don't remember where I went after that.
Oh man, no, I had another example I wanted to bring up because I was like I was baffled that you said these two things and I was like, man, like these are both really good. It's probably going to come back to me like right when we're wrapping up the call
Go
together
ahead,
and I'll
Jen.
say, wait.
Yeah,
No,
we can hit
that's
it.
yeah, remember that time you said, no, that's cool. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing those and like I said, I'll come back to the second one when it comes back here, but um we talked a little bit right before we started recording about, being able to help junior engineers. And I know you said that you're passionate about that. I think for me, that's been something in a lot of content I put out. I try to make sure that I'm, as much as I can, doing a service to that group of people because it's definitely challenging. And especially right now, I think it's challenging. I always think that, there's barriers and stuff that people talk themselves out of like, hey, I'm not smart enough to do this kind of thing. But I think now there's just a lot more going on that probably doesn't help. I don't know where to start off with this kind of question or this segue, but maybe from your perspective, like what do you think are the top sort of challenges that you're observing like juniors are getting stuck with it? I don't mean like you have evidence that says like
Sure.
89% of juniors struggle with this, but
Yeah. So I think the big thing is actually not the junior's fault, and it's
okay.
I'm willing to say I'll put my neck out. Right. I think it's the engineering manager's fault. Uh, I think we are expecting way too much from junior engineers, and right. Yeah. This is and I'm totally guilty of this. I am. So I'm not trying to like come from like a high horse or anything like that. Like I'm
Sure.
very guilty of this, and I only knew by talking to my junior engineers. They were like, "Not gonna lie, man. Like this just seems a little unreasonable," and I was like, oh crap, like is it? Maybe it is. So
Yeah.
it
Okay.
definitely, and that sucks as a manager too, right? Because you want to be like, I want to give you the right amount of work where I push you a little bit, but not too much. And I think what especially non-technical managers, they see LLMs and
Hmm.
they think everything's free now. You know, there's so many no-code solutions to software these days. You can use ChatGPT, or in my favorite, it's Claude right now. The 3.5 Sonnet version is really good. But a lot of times it's like, oh, hey, go and do this thing, right? Go implement. So I had a junior engineer who their task was to implement a connection to Mongo in an ETL. So basically an ingest pipeline for those of you who
Okay.
aren't familiar with ETL yet. And the idea was data was coming in effectively a funnel. It was getting processed, and then it was getting stored into the database. Well, this developer said, all right, it works really good. It's really fast. And I was like, all right, how many records did you test? And they're like, oh, I only tested one. And I was like, all right, well, go test 10,000. And it's those types of things as a junior engineer, you're like, whoa, okay, I didn't think about that. And tested even 1,000, and the whole microservice just absolutely crashed, right? And it was because ChatGPT, and they just you're only as good as your prompt is, right? So
Yeah.
if your prompt is not good, and as a junior engineer, you don't know all of the things to ask it quite yet. And I think not even as a junior, as just an engineer, you probably don't know all of the things to ask. Uh, they're making a new client to the database on every single ingest. So instead of one client, it was 1,000 clients, right? That doesn't scale in the real world. You know,
Right.
there's only a pool of so many clients available. So this was one of those cases where it's like, as a senior, you see it and you're like, oh wait, I get that. That's an easy one to make the mistake on. But
Yeah.
the biggest struggle I see is by putting this pressure of excelling and executing on these junior engineers, you pretty much back them into a corner where their only option is to use LLMs these days. And it's very easy to get yourself, you know, kind of in a pickle when you don't know all of the questions. You're only as good as your prompt is, and you just, you know, on ChatGPT, it's a perfect solution. But like I said, when you throw in all of the other external factors, because ChatGPT doesn't have your whole baseline, it makes a very different result. So I actually think engineering managers quite truthfully need to do better and just set better expectations and have a much more realistic timeline for the given individual, not even just juniors, just the individual.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting point, and I think something you brought up, sort of in our pre-recording conversation, pretty briefly, but along that train of thought, where take the scenario, you have a more junior engineer, and it when I say more junior engineer, please keep in mind that this could literally be any engineer, but it's
Right.
probably more common, say, with someone more junior. But they're like, hey, I have this problem to go solve, and I feel like if I don't know it, like I could ask AI, I can ask an LLM for some help here. And the reality is LLMs, like, they're so fast now, and they're able to create solutions for you that it almost feels like it's like irresponsible to not try it just to see like what
Of
it's doing,
course.
right? You're like, hey,
Of
like it
course.
gives me an answer really fast, like why would I not? It's kind of like, to me, it feels like rubber ducking, right? If I could turn to a
Yep.
person at work, even in my swivel chair, turn over to them and be like, hey man, like, super quick, what do you think about like this? And they're like, off the top of my head, I wonder if I would design it. It just feels like you have that at your fingertips. So I think that the difference is that people aren't realizing, like, maybe don't just assume it's perfect. And especially, I love your point about you're only as good as your prompt. But I think the thing that I wanted to mention from our pre-talk is that when you keep doing this kind of thing, it's almost like being able to turn to the person in your cube or whatever, depending on how your work is set up. You turn to them and you say, hey, could what do you think about designing this? And they go, here's what I would do. And then you go, thank you, copy, paste. And you're like, yeah, it works.
Right.
What's the next thing to go solve? And the drawback to that is that you don't actually get better at solving the problems. You are solving more problems, perhaps, but are you getting better at doing it? What are your thoughts? And again, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Please put
what are
me on
your
the spot.
thoughts
Let's
on
do it.
what are your thoughts on how people can maybe try to break that cycle, and maybe like, if maybe from the perspective of like, hey, you as an individual, maybe someone more junior, or as someone who's like a tech lead or engineering manager, like how can you help others like to identify this, like, kind of this behavior?
Yeah. So I think a big thing is if you're going to ChatGPT before you go to the documentation of the software,
Mm,
maybe consider trying the other way around. I'm not saying it's right to go the other way around, but maybe consider it. One of the big things that I see ChatGPT and other LLMs get wrong is sometimes APIs are very different between versions. And if you don't
mm,
provide all of that context up front, you might be solving it in a solution from a version that you're not running, right? So unexpected behavior, and now you're red herring city. And if those of y'all are new in your career, we call it a red herring, where it's kind of like seems like it's the root problem. It's not even close to the root problem. And it's very easy to get yourself down these rabbit holes. So number one, check the documentation. Actually go and read the API docs. People are still making them, even if they're making them with AI now these days. Like they're still there, and generally they're right. Some of the SHAD CN documentation is not correct, but check the documentation first. And then outside of that, you're right. LLMs are wonderful for rubber ducking. And like I said, if those of y'all are new, rubber ducking is when you're just talking to, your water bottle, like, hey, what do you think about this? And it's just you talking it out loud. And by talking it out loud, you're kind of walking through the patterns that you need to take into consideration. What I really recommend is, as you're rubber ducking with ChatGPT, ask it questions. Have it
mhm.
explain to you, like, okay, you told me to do this thing. Why? Like, I don't understand it. Provide me some links, provide me documentation, give me justification, and then you can fact check it. Like, you can go still to Google. Google's still around, as much as I forget to use it sometimes. But fact check it. Go read the documentation. The other big pro tip is get yourself involved in as many Slack and Discord communities as you can, because tools like Prisma, Mongo, like all of these different tools that we are generally using, especially on like enterprise applications, they all have groups that you can just go talk to real people. Hey, struggling with this. What do you think? And those are the types of things that, as a junior engineer, if you take initiative and go and figure out the problems by building
Mm.
your network and talking to other people, oh my goodness, you're going to blow your engineering manager's mind, because they're like, wow, like what a great resource that you just made. Super ingenuitive, very proud of you, right? And I think those are the types of things that juniors, or like I said, any engineer should really be considering.
Yeah, it's almost, it kind of feels like we're taking, I don't know if people like are registering it, but it's kind of like taking shortcuts, right? And again, that might help you get to an answer faster, but when we're so used to leaning into it, we don't build some of these fundamental skills up. Like, kind of sounds funny, but like I think personally, as an engineer, when you're working in teams and in a company with multiple teams, like being able to network and know the right subject matter expert who you can go talk to about things, like that's a skill. If you're just like
Yep.
blinders on, I'm just working, I'm not kind of lifting my head up, like you're not working in a team that way. So, being able to navigate that stuff's important. I like your example about the rubber ducking. Thank you for explaining that, because I also realized too that yeah, some of the terminology and stuff is doesn't land well. A quick tangent, was that I had employees from Mexico, and we were talking about dog fooding, and like we're having things that we're testing our own stuff. And I remember at
Yep.
one point someone was in like a one-on-one was like, "What's dog fooding? Like, what does?"
Eat the
And I
same
was like,
dog
"Oh
food.
man, like I never thought about the fact that maybe in different cultures and stuff, they're like these things just don't make sense." um,
It's
but
one of the first things I do on every project I get on. And we're an Atlassian, right? Which a lot of people are either Atlassian or Azure. I
yep,
set a Confluence page of domain words and
cool.
acronyms. I work in public sector. Everything's an acronym. So it's really helpful to, especially for onboarding engineers, like, all right, go learn how to speak us, and you'll have a much easier time transitioning in.
Yeah, Microsoft is definitely an acronym company. So the point that I was making before my tangent, I'm really bad with tangents, was that I like the idea of suggesting rubber ducking with an LLM. And I think the really cool part about that is like when we talk about rubber ducking in general, rubber ducking is not a process of like how do I get the perfect, or how do I get the exact single answer that is perfect. It's about the thought process. And I think the framing of that is very helpful when working with LLMs, because you're not going, "Hey, Chat GPT, I expect you to give me the fact." Like I
Right.
ask you a question, what's the fact? It's more like, "Hey, Chat GPT, like get my brain moving in a direction that helps me solve problems." And then, the big difference between, I mean, there's a handful of big differences between ChatGPT and a rubber duck, but one of the big like meta differences is that a rubber duck doesn't talk back to you, right? Like
Right.
you are kind of the person who's uh, triggering these different things in your brain by saying things. Like you're trying to explain things to a rubber duck, and that makes you think about things a different way. But when you can do that to an LLM and it gives you feedback, like here's some other things to think about. Now you have like this extra layer of like, hey, I haven't thought about that, or that does
Hmm.
reinforce this thought. So I like that advice about rubber ducking with an LLM. I think that's cool.
Especially when you can ask it questions. So like whenever you are rubber ducking with an LLM, very specifically ask it, how does this scale? What other considerations should I take into mind? And what you're doing, I love that you said you're not trying to find the solution. What you're doing is you're developing the mind map, right? Your Miro board or your board of all of the lines and from the central answer, you're trying to discover what that map looks like. And
Sure.
that's what allows you to go down all of those different rabbit holes and figure out, oh, how does this scale? Oh, if we're reading, maybe we should read from a queue so that way we can scale up multiple workers so that we can federate the work across and have a better efficiency rather than trying to, it's the horizontal versus vertical scaling in software. And it's those types of things. Heck yeah, go and ask the tool and let the tool help point you in any direction. And then you can go start actually figuring out the details.
Yeah, the I feel like this gets missed when we talk, and I don't want to go on too much of a rant here, but when we talk about software engineering, right? Like software engineering has a word in it that's pretty interesting, and that word is engineering. And sometimes I feel like when we talk about software engineering, we forget that word. It's kind of like my role strictly as a software engineer is like I make the code, and like
Right.
that's part of what happens, but you're solving
Half of it.
problems based on software, right? So I think what we end up missing is like we have to think about the constraints, we have to be asking what the constraints are, and then you're trying to solve problems based on a set of constraints. It's not, hey, chat gpt, I don't want to pick on the example you gave. So if that person's ever listening to this and they're like, man, they're tearing me apart, it was just a simple MongoDB thing. But if you take that example and it's like, hey, chat gpt, I need to put records from this type of source into this database. And it's like, sure, here you go. What's missing there is like there's no other context except the technology. There's no
Right.
the scale of it, the types of data, like if you have to do other processing, like expectations around latency, round trip, what does a system look like? It's all missing.
Right.
So how do you, and again, not to pick on the person, but like how do you expect to have a good solution if you're not thinking about the constraints in your system? So
And that's exactly where I think engineering managers need to play a bigger role. I think on the engineering manager side, I also think maybe not like subconsciously that we also use LLMs. I'm not saying we don't. I do it every single day, both
mhm,
professionally and personally, every single day. And I think because of that, and because we already did it the hard way, I think it's actually easier for us to take it for granted that we know those questions to ask, and
right.
we need to do a better job about mentoring and even dividing out the tickets a little more granular so that it's just an easier time for them to not step in the wrong direction. And I think if you can find a healthy balance of, I'm going to make you ask questions, I'm going to make you figure things out, right? I
Mhm.
want you to figure things out because that's how you grow, but I'm not going to throw you, I'll throw you in the deep end. I'm not going to throw you in the ocean, right? And I think that's a
Yep.
huge difference. And I think more and more people and more new engineers, whether you're older or younger, are just kind of getting thrown in the ocean.
Cool. No, that's I think that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, that thanks for kind of navigating that bit on like LLMs, because I think that's important. It's probably a really common thing for especially junior engineers kind of getting into this space. I wanted to make sure we had some time carved out to talk a little bit about content creation, kind of the stuff that you're doing, because I wanted to say obviously like thank you to you being able to make time to come chat with me, but it's also an opportunity to kind of share like what you got going on, and I think aside from that, like maybe touching on a lesson for people, which is like yeah, like we only got so much time, and how are you kind of balancing being able to create outside of work and just having life in general? So I don't have an exact kickoff point here, but I wanted to turn it over to
Sure.
you and say, like, what are your thoughts on like being able to balance this stuff, and kind of what are you building and focusing on?
Yeah. So some of the backstory is during COVID, I got a side hustle and it was woodworking, and I was actually making pretty good money. You know, 1 to 2K a month outside of work, which you're like, oh my goodness, I'm rich now. But
That's awesome.
along the way. Yeah, it was really great, and I was make like my wife works in the real estate world, and so we have a lot of friends that are realtors. So I was selling cutting boards to real estate agents as closing gifts, and they were buying them like hotcakes. So it
That's
really
so cool.
was awesome. Yeah, it was great, and it was like I enjoyed it, and it will be one of those things where I'll go back and when I retire and I'll woodwork in the garage all day. But the downside was my wife and I just had our first child, right along the same time where I'm like, all right, I'm a woodworker now, and I pretty much made my wife with a newborn a single parent because I had to work my 9 to 5 and then go in the garage to fulfill client orders of all these cutting boards. And hard lesson. I recognized like, oh, that's not pretty cool. I don't want my wife to be a single parent, so I hung up, the shop apron, so to say, stopped woodworking altogether. Now, as my child is getting a little older and I'm getting a little more flexibility in my time, thankfully my child sleeps really well. I know that's not everybody's situation, but I'm getting more time. So what I'm building is an app called Benchbox, and this app is for the woodworker, either the small business, the garage workshop hero, the weekend warrior type person. And what this app's going to do is allow you to track your projects, your inventory, some of the events like the craft fairs you're going to, your
Cool.
finances. The reason for this is when I was kind of in the game, all of this stuff sucked to manage. I was like, okay, how much inventory do I have left? Let me try to remember how big the stack of wood was visually and take a guess. And it's like, there's better ways to do it. And there was no tools to do it while I was out there. And I was like, well, this is
Interesting.
silly. A year and a half later, all right, I'll make the tool. So a lot of it for me was genuine curiosity on learning new tech. This will be a paid product eventually in the future that who knows, maybe it'll do really well. But a lot of it is it's just a lot of fun. And I think a lot of this, so and I guess, just to be super clear, I still work my 9 to 5. I have a wife, I have a kid. I'm building I'm doing YouTube content. We have a premium Discord community that we're building up right now, which I don't pocket a penny from that. Every single penny every month gets donated to kids in STEM. So, that's
Awesome.
kind of like another passion project of mine. I know some people are like, ooh, I don't want to pay for a Discord community. And it's like, all right, at least literally every single penny goes to a really good cause. And every month, everybody in the Discord community gets to vote on where the money goes. So that's been a
Awesome.
lot of fun. So I'm doing all of these things. And you're like, all right, how the hell does he balance all of that? Really, really structured output. And the big thing, I know, Nick, you're a big time journaler. I'm a big time journaler. I write out my tasks every night, and it sounds like okay, cool, but I don't feel like I'm gonna do it. And there's days I don't, but the days I do, I come sit down on my computer before my kid gets up for school and just go to work for a little bit. And it's not anything crazy. Like it's just my cozy tasks. And and actually maybe that's a good thing to talk about. One of my secrets, and I'm gonna probably make it in a Notion template and just give it away for free,
Cool.
is I have 2 stacks of work. I have like my no crap heads down focus work, generally when I'm building the app. And then I have all of my what I call my asynchronous work. And that's things like the emails, working on this. And the reality is, let's say work's over, my kid's asleep. So now it's just like time to spend with my wife. There's some nights where she's like, honestly, I just want to read a book. And I'm like, Roger that. I'll go work on something. But then
Sure.
there's other times where we're just spending time together. And the beauty of that asynchronous work catalog, backlog, so to say, is how I structure it is as days go on, I still set a due date. And as days go on, things will progressively move into the nope, focus on this work. So that if I get to it, wonderful. If I don't get to it, I don't feel the guilt and shame of not getting another task done, which I know a lot of people suffer with. So have your 2 separate backlogs of work, the low hanging fruit, like,
Mm.
okay, if I don't make progress on this, it's not going to kill me. But if I have some time and I make progress on this, it's better than zero, and you can work at it at any pace. Now, like I said, if you still need due dates, like I just sent out looms to everybody that signed up to be a beta user for my app, just thanking them, and then trying to get some more details, like what kind of phone do you have. That was asynchronous work. That is like, if I don't send that loom tonight, no sweat. But I still have a due date, so if it's like, if it gets to the end of this weekend, it's like, okay, it's gonna migrate to the no crap, get it done catalog, and then I'll just
Right.
plan it in as focus work as normal. So I think that's
That's
been
really
super
interesting.
helpful for me.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I then for me, like I go. It's funny. I don't know why it doesn't work for me this way. I wish that I could use digital apps for like my to do list, but I find when it's digital, I don't do it. But a notebook, some I just wish it wasn't this way. Something about physically, like I don't even check off things. I like fill them out. Like I fill in a little box, and I actually, it's funny going back to my first mentor. I believe it was him that had his to do list with little square boxes, and
Yep.
I remember having this conversation with him, and he was like, "I fill them in," and I was at the time, I'm like, "Okay, like that's seems a little weird, but like if it works for you,
It's a
cool."
mental thing.
Um, and now I'm not going to move my camera because I don't want to mess up, try to reposition it. But I also have a whiteboard wall, and it's filled with list items that have these big squares on them to fill in. And I often go between my notebook, and when I start finding that I'm not sticking to my notebook of things to try and do, I've learned now that instead of just falling off and being like, I guess I can't have a list of things because like I'm falling behind, I just switch the medium and I go right to the whiteboard. I kind of recreate the list. And then what will happen is over time, the whiteboard, I'm like, oh, like I'm falling behind on it. Like I'm just not using it. And I go back to the notebook and I find I go between these two formats. And for me, it keeps it such that when I check off a box and I say check off, I'm filling in that box. I go, that feels good. Like I got something done.
Yeah,
Like
nice.
and like what's the next thing? And it's a momentum thing for me. So
That's it.
I just feel like people have to find the tools that kind of work for them.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And I also have a whiteboard just off camera here, and I have a slew of things on that whiteboard. Uh, Ideas that I'd love to do in the future. I tell my wife all the time, I could live 100 lives and never be bored. I'm definitely I just want to do everything kind of person. But no, you're exactly right. You got to find the medium that works for you. If Notion works for you, cool. If paper and pencil are your kind of vibe, then rock paper and pencil. Let it gel and work with you rather than trying to force yourself into
It's
some
a
kind of
tool,
tool
right?
just because it's hot, right? I, and this is where the asynchronous work is awesome. If you, especially as you add more and more responsibilities to your plate, if I were to spend every day spending a half an hour or an hour in the morning just trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do today,
Right.
my productivity would be way down. But if I can spend that time like while I'm watching Netflix with my wife, it's kind of like I said, asynchronous. You could do it while you're doing other things. Sometimes while I'm driving, I'll just open a memo and just start vomiting what I'm trying to do for the day, and then I'll come
Yep.
back and I'll listen to it, and I'll listen on like a 1.5x or something, and then I can figure out exactly what tasks. You can find opportunities where you can kind of parallelize these and gain that huge efficiency, and it compounds. It's not like it's not just like it happens once. It's
Right.
specifically making a to-do list and figuring out what your tasks are before you go to work them at a separate time is like I said, it's a compounding thing, and it adds a lot more time per week than you think it will.
Yeah, I love that. It's an interesting hack to be able to parallelize things. And my most recent one, this is probably very specific to me, but maybe not. Maybe there's other people like this. I like bodybuilding. Been sort of in the gym as long as I've been programming, which is kind of weird to think about. But um, I hate doing cardio. But I what I hate about cardio is like I will never run. You'll never ever see me sprinting. I just can't bring myself to do it. But I'm like, you know what? If I have to do cardio, I'm going to walk. I'll walk at a fast pace. I'll do it. The problem is that when you're trying to pick which of these things is going to burn more calories, you have to obviously walk for longer than you would be sprinting. So if
Of
I want
course.
to go walk for an hour, and I want time. Like, when the heck am I gonna get an extra hour to carve out? Like, I got stuff to do. So I realized I don't like doing cardio, and it takes a long time. But I realized that I don't know if it's in the frame, maybe not. Oh, it's under the couch now. But there's a treadmill under there, a walking pad, and
I have one right over here.
Nice. And I found that what I can do is I can do cardio, which I hate, and I can also pick other tasks that I hate doing, like editing short form videos. I hate doing it. But I'll go carve them out and stuff with some AI tools, annotate captions and stuff to go post. And I'll do two things I hate at the same time. But what I love is that I'm twice as
They're
productive.
both
I
done.
go,
Yeah,
look
they're
how
both
much
done.
I'm getting done. And that's the hack for me to go, hell yeah, like I'm going to keep doing this. So just got to
Now you
find
get to
things to
fill
do.
in 2 boxes.
That's right. And that's the dopamine hit is not like,
That's right.
oh, thankfully I got my cardio done. I'm like, that's sucks. I hate doing it. But like I get two boxes filled out. And they're two things that I think are important. I just don't like doing them. So
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
I have the walking treadmill too, and another last minute hack here for any engineer is I dedicate 1 to 2 hours a week, assuming there's like no demo that week. I'll dedicate 1 to 2 hours during my work hours and walk on my little walking pad underneath my desk and do some kind of training or learning. And
Cool.
I've never had any boss that is like, "Oh, don't do that," because you can always justify why it's good for you to spend an hour of time learning a little bit of the tech that you're using, whether it's be a course, a YouTube video. Like I'm getting involved more in Nest JS. It's
Mm,
basically the Spring framework for Node TypeScript apps, and it's been super fun. I went and just walked on my walking treadmill over a couple days, did the entire course, like read and listened, took some notes from all the modules, took the test at the end, and now I have the certificate and did cardio all at the same time.
awesome. That's multitasking at its finest.
That's right.
That's cool. No, Andrew, I wanted to say thank you for this conversation and making the time to chat with me through this stuff. I didn't get I'll follow up with you and make sure I can collect actual links to put in descriptions and all that kind of stuff. But for folks that are listening and watching, where can people find you? I know you're on YouTube, you're on social media. Like, let us know where it's good to find you.
Sure. Well, first, before I give you that, Nick, it has been a true pleasure.
Cool.
Really thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. This is my first podcast I'm ever doing,
Awesome.
so let's do some more. Had a lot of
Yes.
fun.
Absolutely.
I have a lot to say, so
Cool.
very happy to talk. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube and Threads at Andrew Peacock, just like the bird, Peacock, and that's predominantly where you're going to find me. If you're interested in joining that Discord community, it is a monthly price, but every single penny goes to kids in STEM. That is
Awesome.
subb.me/@ Andrew Peacock. So all of the links, I'll hit you up with them. You can drop
Yeah,
them
yeah.
wherever makes sense for you. But like I said, this has truly been a lot of fun. Very happy to meet you and have a chance to talk with you. I've been following your videos, and I've watched your other podcasts in the past, and they've all been helpful for me. So I really appreciate
Cool.
it.
No, well, thank you so much. And of course, yeah, we'll follow up with more. This has been a really cool conversation. And I feel like we covered a lot of ground where there's some actionable stuff for people listening. So I think hopefully the audience will really appreciate that. So thanks
Yeah,
again. And
if you need one segue word,
yeah,
it's just start. Just start.
just start.
Start
I love that.
somewhere.
That's awesome. Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, Andrew. And we'll follow up with links. So thanks
Take
everyone for
care.
watching. We'll see you next time.